Tailwind is great. It changed my mind. My name's Nick. I'm the organizer of Nebraska JS. I'm also on a podcast called the JS Party. And I'm a software dev at Side Effects Consulting with John, who just presented. And you can go visit me. It's the same website, just several dad times. TypeScript.dad, because I really like TypeScript. I used to run TypeScript CompUS. Vim.dad, because I really like Vim. .files.dad, as I mentioned in Christine's talk earlier. And Tailwind.dad, of course, because Tailwind is awesome, and I'm a dad. I think Tailwind is great. That's why I'm up here talking about it. But if you don't, I still love you. I posted that on Twitter and various places and got various negative remarks. Because Tailwind is like one of those topics that people have opinions on. And opinions are great. My opinions are mine, and they're probably wrong in many cases. Yeah, I'm still friends with everybody on this list. I mentioned one person who might be able to change my mind on it, and that is the previous talk by Stephanie earlier today on CSS. So definitely check out modern CSS.net. She's right there, and we were just talking over lunch about how the things that she was showing, I have no idea how to do those in Tailwind, or if you can do those new things in Tailwind. But CSS is great, and I will argue in this that you need to know CSS really well to use Tailwind anyway, so you can mix that. You don't have to be one or the other. So let's have a conversation about that. Why it's great or terrible, and why CSS is great or terrible. So real quick, what is Tailwind? It's just a utility-first set of CSS classes that gets built up. It's just, I want to apply a padding of 8 pixels to the right side, so I'll have a PR-8 or whatever. And so it's just like, I'm not going to think about this as like, this is my button component, or this is my header component. I'm going to think this is a header that needs a padding of this, so I'm going to add a padding, and you just have independent utility-level classes for that. So you focus on the consistency and the maintainability of that by focusing on the lower level CSS pieces and using those as classes rather than having a single class that has lots of different pieces together. And you can customize that and force customization through the Tailwind config. And I'll argue that that's a great tool for design systems. Someone who actually works on design systems might disagree, and that's totally okay. I would take her opinion over mine for sure. Tailwind is not a modern Twitter bootstrap. It often gets referred to or equated to Twitter bootstrap because Twitter bootstrap back in the day, anybody use Twitter bootstrap? Everyone, yeah. You could pick out a Twitter bootstrap project pretty much anytime you saw it. It was just there. Same thing with like jQuery UI before that. Like you can tell this is jQuery UI for sure. Tailwind is not that. You'll see a lot of that because Tailwind makes it really easy to just copy and paste styles. They have like a whole Tailwind component thing that basically you just copy and paste the style. So that's like a good starting place. But it's not that. It's also not a component library. It's not going to give you an input field, a text box, any of that. It's going to be you're going to bring all of that yourself. Tailwind is also not opinionated beyond, it doesn't think that you should use names in CSS for things beyond the utilities. So a simple example is like this box, this cheese box that I made. My demos are not usually as cool as yours. But this is like the CSS that went into making one. So I have a cheese. I had to give it some arbitrary name. And then down here in the div, I have a div with a class of type cheese where then I type cheese. So I have a lot of cheese to make my cheese. And then a lot of like things put together. And that's what it looks like. What's not to love about this? I've got random arbitrary styles that I've repeated. I've got width and height that are the same. I've got arbitrary colors. I've got random CSS or X values in there for my color. I could use the new things that I totally don't understand. And I've got random arbitrary paddings and numbers everywhere. So it's hard to maintain that, in my opinion. But I will say that CSS is great. I really like CSS. As I was mentioning at lunch, anything that I can do in CSS, I feel like it's free. If I could make an animation work or some kind of interaction work in CSS, it frees up the JavaScript thread, and I can do more things in JavaScript or do less things altogether and just like make CSS do the things that it's great at, which is awesome. So I do think that to appreciate Tailwind, you have to know and appreciate CSS, or you're not going to like it. But I just think that this is kind of hard to maintain from like a team perspective, keeping everybody on the same page. At C2FO, the company that John and I previously worked for, I went through like 3 rebrands in 3 years, and that was difficult going through and finding all of the myriad ways that things might have been styled, not just by me, but by the team. There's things like this. There's things in CSS and JS. There's things in other places. And finding all of those and changing them 3 times is not very because it can also look like this. It could look like the CSS and JS world. So I've got this, but now it's like arbitrary strings inside of a JS thing that's getting built with StyleX or whatever. And I think that's also just as equally hard to maintain. And I'll talk about why in just a sec. Because, I guess right now, to make a change to that, I would have to find the CSS file or the JS file. I'd have to find the arbitrary name that was used for that, so cheese in this case. And then I'd have to determine if any other selectors were acting upon that element. So there's like lots of different things. You're really relying on the cascade, which I think is great, but can be difficult to figure out where things are coming from and what's changing. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of CSS and JS. So this is coming from like a JavaScript, TypeScript developer's perspective. I think that CSS and JS is the worst thing ever happened. I said the same thing in 2013. I was at the announcement where Facebook announced React to the world, and I said the same thing about JSX. The difference is I came around quickly to JSX and I really like it. I don't think I could ever come around to CSS and JS because it's just ugly, it's terrible, and hard to work with. And I don't like scrolling up and down my files to find everything. I'd rather have it all in line. So this is an example from the same cheese file, right? I've got a React component basically that I'm creating and just making styles. This is using Material UI, which may be jadedly a lot of CSS and JS. Material UI 4 specifically, I just don't like that project. Material UI 5 is much better, but it still uses emotion. The dropping emotion in Material UI 6. So if you want to keep switching whatever you're doing, stick with Material UI. Also, things like this, like where you have like nested selectors or like combined selectors or more difficult selectors, it can be difficult to understand. In Stephanie's amazing examples, like I was mentioning at lunch that I didn't know what like the plus sign meant and all that. And that's just like a skill issue on my part. Like I'll come around to that as later. We'll get more examples with it. But this is like also like this is them, I think. Like I don't know what to change things. What's taking precedence? It's more difficult to you have to really understand the rules of CSS to understand the precedence that's happening here. And what if I change this? Did I unintentionally cause changes elsewhere that are going to cause problems? But let's make our cheese block with Tailwind. Yeah, it's to me a little bit simpler, less code, and I'm setting things up. I think better success story for me to maintain this going forward. So when I have next year's rebrand, I can make this blue cheese or something else. And so like instead of saying width and height of 8 rem, I've got size 32. That'll set width and height for me automatically. BG yellow 300. Yellow 300, what's that? That's a color that's defined in my Tailwind config, which is derived from my design system. So I'm not using some willy-nilly yellow color. It is the yellow that is our brand color, and I'm using that. Setting up Flexbox, centering items, justifying that. So using Flex to center cheese within the cheese block. And all of that is derived from the Tailwind config. It's this Tailwind config file in version 4. They are experimenting with dropping that and just CSS file to configure all of that. I don't know how that will work with more complex configs, but I'm excited for that. I think bringing it closer to CSS is a win for everybody. But with the Tailwind config, I can define specifically the colors, the sizes, everything, the paddings that I want to use, the fonts that I want to use. It's all in one file. I manage that, and when I want to make a change to it, that's one place that I make the change. And then if like I change the, what actual underlying text value color yellow 300 is, then it's going to change throughout my app in one place. And you can also use that, like you can export tokens from things like Figma, I think. And there's like I forgot if it's a 1ABG or a W3C proposal for like tokens.
It's a community proposal.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. But there is a proposal for that to just have like design tokens, and then you can use that to build things like a Tailwind config, so that it's all just like you can have your main source of truth be like Figma, and then every time you just export tokens from there, rebuild your Tailwind config, and then you have that available. So it makes one place to do all of that, and you have less fighting and changing things arbitrarily between like what the designers are giving you in Figma and what you're actually writing in the design system or in the there's no mental overhead with naming things. I don't have to say like, oh, this is my header, this is my tease, and this is, well, that's just, there's thousands of arbitrary utility classes, and I use those, and then they get, the ones that I don't use get stripped out. So it's just always the same name, which is fantastic if you're working across several projects, because I don't have to go learn what a cheese is in another project. I just know that I got PL3 for Tailwind 3 in this project, and I got it over here. So it really is transferable between projects, which is nice. But my number one reason for loving Tailwind, and I forgot, I haven't looked at these slides in a few months, so I forgot what it's coming at, but it's easy to refactor. As I mentioned, go through three rebrands. Every time we got a new chief marketing officer, put their brand on it, and going through and trying to debug that, trying to change those files every time. When the files, the CSS could be in CSS, it could be in CSS and JS, or it could be like inline weird like box things with the material-wise box component with that SX property on it. There's several of those. Like just how do I do this? I can't do this in one single way. I have to account for looking for all of those different ways and then changing it everywhere. But Tailwind, like the way that I've done that is I ignore that, this is from a previous iteration, but the way to do that would be to like write code mods for each of those instances that can go search that, find it, and replace it and rewrite the code for you automatically. Code mods are fantastic for that. They're very hard to write, very hard to keep right as you go. But with Tailwind, because it's class names that look the same across projects and they have arbitrary values, you can do find and replace, or find and replace with very simple regular expressions to like change, the value 300 to the value 500 or whatever. And it makes it really easy to just literally do that, find and replace in your editor to do those quick refactors. So that was my quick spiel on Tailwind and why I like it. But enough about my opinions. What are your opinions on Tailwind?
I hate Tailwind.
Yes, you're not wrong.
So you have your PG yellow or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, with CSS, you just have that defined in one spot, like using SAS or whatever. You have one color that could be like primary, and then you change it in one spot. But now you have yellow, and you have to change it in all the different places to be blue or something else. And so you can't change that color without changing your variable name in every place, where you wouldn't have to use the CSS.
Yeah, that's great. A great comment. I will retort that and say that you can only change it in one place in the Tailwind config, and you could have set up arbitrary values to say like color primary is color yellow and have that kind of self-referencing Tailwind.
When you're naming CSS things, you don't try to think of I forget the term. When you're naming classes, they're not arbitrary, they're not cheese, they are significant, they have some kind of meaning or something, so that you can then style all the other things of that same type. Okay, so instead of having, I'm looking at code here, and I have all these like 15 different Tailwind utility things. I see, header or something. It's like very easy to understand, as opposed to you said something about trying to remember like all the different ones, and I can't remember all the different Tailwind things. So why are remembering all the Tailwind utility classes better than? I don't know what you were arguing.
This is fantastic. Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from, and I think that we're just looking at it from different lenses. You see a bunch of arbitrary Tailwind classes and don't see like what they're building up towards. You would rather have it named like a header or this form or whatever. Totally understand that. the way I approach it, and I'll caveat that I'm more of a React developer, so I think of things as components. So I consolidate the encapsulation that I have is the component, the React component itself that has several Tailwind classes on it that then make up the whole. But then when I'm using that component, like a text input or whatever, I'm just thinking about it as a React text input component and not thinking about the underlying Tailwind. The other piece that I wanted to point out or to talk about, let me see. I'm just opening a random file here. Okay, so if I have like a div, right? Let's put a div and class. That's okay. If I have just like a class here, the cool thing, the best thing about Tailwind too, or another really amazing feature of Tailwind is that Tailwind ships with a language server just like TypeScript does. So if I wanted to say BG dash, here's all of the colors, and it's not just all of the colors that are randomly defined. These are the colors that are specifically defined in my Tailwind. And so I don't have to remember all of them. It'll auto-complete for me as I go. And then, this is kind of a cheat, but I have a tool called...
Will is too polite. He's had a question for like 5 minutes.
I know,
everything you're saying is going to compliment what you're good.
Yeah, so yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, a Raycast extension that just helps me. So if I wanted to set like a padding, I can search for all of the padding classes right here and it'll tell me. But the other cool thing about like in here is if I'm doing like M dash and I say I want to do, why is it not there? I don't know why that's not working. That's a Vim problem. But that pop-up that keeps showing and then immediately going away, that would actually show me the underlying CSS that would be applied when I set max W80 or whatever. So I get all of those help acceptance from the language server itself, making it way easier to.
So really the thing that you perhaps may should put it up front is that it's more about tooling support than just running CSS.
Yeah. Probably. I didn't think about it like that. Yes, that's exactly it. Because I'm just always heads down on my shoulders. Okay, well.
So I've been using Tailwind for ever since it came out effectively. I used Tachyon before it, which is another kind of variant of like modular CSS. I do something sacrilege, and the Barcamp app that y'all have been using is built with Tailwind. But the sacrilege thing that I do, that even the maintainer of Tailwind suggests not to, is I use apply statements. So I use post CSS to actually process some stuff, so that I can get both the tooling language server to like give me the these are the shorthand, padding, margin, shorthand stages of what those things are, and apply it as he's showing here. To me, I love this because I create a class and then use Tailwind to effectively construct it. And if you look at the Barcamp stuff, that's what I'm doing. I have a design system that I've been working on for like years, ever since I left Flywheel.
So why are you not supposed to do that?
I think generally his thought process, I'm blanking on his name. Can you reply to Wayman? Yeah, I'm waiting. I think his thought process is it's supplementary, it's not Tailwind out of the box, sort of. And it could go away because what Nick was sharing was that potentially version 4 could use constructed CSS math and functions and stuff without using any kind of tooling like JavaScript, which I do see, and I totally see the value. That's kind of, for me, it's just like that's leadership. I prefer stuff. I prefer to have a logical class, like Barcamp-header, exactly what you're saying. And inside of that class, I use all the Tailwind stuff. And then if Tailwind just isn't fitting with something because I get really creative with my CSS, then that's when I have the ability to break out of that hole. And yet, at the same time, I still have the behavior in my Ruby app with Vue components. I can still, and in React, that's different, those are different projects, but I still have the behavior that I can just use the helper classes. that search through the entire code base. And I'm like, okay, cool. I can just like add this helper class that I don't normally use in one place, and it compiles and includes that. So it's like only what I need and only what I specifically define for like the hero of the bar camp site. Yeah, that's a big kind of long rant, but it complements what you're doing.
And I think that's awesome. Like, I'll say I don't like the arbitrary button. I find, and then I have to look in a CSS file and find that button. I don't have a proper language server that's going to surface that to me. And so I don't like that.
And I completely
exactly. That's what I was going to say. Neither of us are right or wrong. Like it's just a preference thing.
Exactly. I in so many ways I agree with you.
Yeah. The most boring argument ever.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm angry.
80% of the benefits that you described were like having consistent tokens.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the difference between that and just CSS? Or that and if you're doing CSS, that's just a JavaScript file, which is fully programmable. Why would I like? That's not really a benefit that Tailwind gives over just like CSS variables, which is
like straight up CSS styles.
like bar dash dash. Yeah, like normal CSS. But like why not just do
like that.
properties?
Well, I'm lazy and I don't like this.
But
Compared to this, that automated form, not with more Copilot.
that'll autocomplete for you, and you don't need a language server for it. It's probably already built into your editor. Which
You would be the CSS.
every editor. CSS is like the easiest. And then the second thing is like you have an example on the screen of like nth child.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you writing JavaScript code to implement that? Because it's not.
And trust you.
Like an nth child selector, like you want to render a table and you want every other row to be the darker gray, and the other rows to be white. I know you can do this in Tailwind. I don't like looking at this in Tailwind. I feel like it's.
Yes, I agree. I actually don't know how to do that in straight Tailwind, but this is where I would fall back to my doing a loop in React, and then we'll just do the ternary in React or in JavaScript extensions as I'm setting the class, and I would use a utility class, a utility helper called CLSX to help with that. To all of that tooling.
Aren't you opening up your UI to visual state bugs where you accidentally apply the wrong style because the JavaScript code down? Whereas if you just rely on CSS, you get a faster engine as well for the browser to apply the styles.
Depends. Yes. In this project, this is my website. All this renders in static HTML, so there is no JavaScript in there. At the end of the day, I'm just using JavaScript to do that. But yeah, there could be trade-offs depending on where you're doing.
I'm just playing it out.
Yeah, for sure. You're not wrong.
Last thing, I use vanilla Rails, no view components. I don't have components at all. Explain to me what I'm supposed to do when I want to render a button in more than one place.
Get a better language tool set. You don't have any of that in Rails?
It's partials are
I can say you get to red part.
yeah, but like a partial for a flat turn anyway, how I do?
Take a look. It doesn't sound like an ideal language should be.
Because you kind of lose form builders as well if you build partials. If you write a custom form builder, that's a whole.
Yeah. That sounds like a language framework issue. I don't know. How would writing CSS having CSS classes like that anyway?
Input class equals class.
But then you like if it's a very complex stuff and it has 10 different dips and for showing an icon, not showing an icon, or having a leading icon or trailing icon, like
Is that a React thing, or is that just a React thing and having to like wrap everything in a different div in order to get the right layout, or like could you just start with one really big CSS class that's pretty complex?
It doesn't matter about React, it's about the more complex underlying HTML structure that you would have to duplicate anyway, and in that case, I would use Rails for that.
I don't know if I've ever had a button that complex. Even like,
Have you had a button that complex?
I will say, so it's difficult because we get into the accessibility conversation too.
That's true.
So are you putting appropriate things in your button to begin with? But I mean, extrapolating from a button, yeah.
Tables, just and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like.
1999.
No, use canvases. I think I'm at time, but I hope that I didn't change anyone's mind, and I hope that you take a look at Tailwind. You put it all in JavaScript.